Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. Today we're going to talk about one of my favorite lure parts in all of fishing, and that is the skirt. I absolutely love making skirts. I've got an entire box of different materials here that I use to make my own skirts. I bring it on tour with me so I can alter the colors of skirts when I feel like there's a specific reason I may need to make a skirt when I'm on the road. So much so that it's become a big activity in my house right now. These are all skirts that my two boys have put together. So I've shown them how to make skirts, and now I get home from someplace and then they're sitting here in the basement bait shop tying skirts up. And it's funny because some of these are excellent. Some of them you see me use on a regular basis, in my tournaments and in my videos. I had a tournament on Clarks Hill Lake where one of the colors that Hank tied up for me was a killer color. But in this case, I'll go through this bag that they tie up and grab skirts and take them to tournaments. So I use them. The thing, though, that I want to point out is not all skirts are made the same. There's three things that I want to point out that can really separate a skirt from other skirts. And I'm going to give you a couple of tips to be able to enhance the skirt to give you better performance that will hopefully, in tune, get you a few extra bites on the water. So before I give you these tips, I do want to remind you, though, that I do have a Tackle Warehouse affiliate. So if you're looking to purchase some tackle and you want to support my channel, please use my link that I'll provide in the video description to make that tackle purchase. Every little bit I make comes right back to the channel. Also, if you want to support the channel in just another way and you haven't subscribed yet to the channel, please subscribe to the channel. It's a great way to show your support as well. All right, so let's talk a little bit about skirts. Most skirts are just going to come, they're pretty standard just with respect to the material. That's some sort of silicone material. Some might have rubber, but generally most skirts are all the same. And there's going to be a certain strand count, depending on the color combination that goes into making the skirt. The thing here is, the first thing I want to point out, the majority of tackle companies out there, when they make a skirt, they make a skirt that's going to be a set size, and then they attach it to the jig or the spinner bait or whatever it is that has the skirt on it. Could be a vibrating jig, could be a swim jig, could be a flipping jig, could be a spinner bait, like I said. The problem with that is oftentimes the skirt is not cut to the correct length. And what I mean by that is, like in this case, I just took this jig out of the package. It's a compact jig. The problem is you can see the skirt material goes probably 1.5 inches below the hook. Now what that does is when you put a trailer on, some trailers, not necessarily all trailers, but when you put that trailer on, so this is just a little 3-inch Berkeley Max Scent Chigger Craw. So when I put that trailer on, which would be perfect for compact jigs, the skirt material is so long that the skirt material will actually stick to those legs. And what that does is it prevents them from flapping. You'd be amazed at how simple a small change in the design of these plastics can create the bait from flapping wildly to not flapping at all. And a skirt, any little piece of skirt material that gets stuck on these flappers will actually prevent them from flapping. So you want to trim your skirts down to the point where they're not touching any appendages that might be flapping. Now, if you don't have flapping appendages, it's not going to be as big of a deal, but with anything that has motion, you're going to want to trim it down. So in this case, I'd be trimming it so it's about 1/4 to maybe 1/2 inch past the bottom of the hook, the bend in the hook. So that's the first thing. You got to recognize that lure manufacturers don't trim them because of the time consuming issue that goes into it. It would be much more costly for them to do it. Plus, there are anglers out there that like to trim skirts in multiple different ways. And therefore, they just go ahead and they leave it as one length. This is the same skirt that they'd probably put on a full-size jig as well. And in that case, on a full-size jig, it probably would be about 1 inch down. So you'd probably trim about 1/2 inch off versus 1 inch. But in either case, you're going to want to trim it. So that's the first issue with most skirts. The second is, if I go through Hank's bag here, I'll pull out a handful. I'm going to find a bunch of different different variations. So he's not fully aware of this yet, even though here's a good one. So here's one jig that's looks like it's got 3 different full tabs in it. And he missed cutting off this piece of the bottom tab right there. This is an extremely full skirt. In this case, it looks like he took, I mean, it's probably 10 total strands and made this skirt. The difference between these is drastic. If I were to put this on a hook, it's not going to have much of an impact at all on creating any sort of performance. If I put this, it's going to be so thick that it's actually a hindrance to the jig. Meaning if you have too much skirt material, what happens, and I would say in this case, I would trim probably at least 1/4 of the material off from the underside of the skirt collar. But if you have too much material, it creates just one big ball of resistance, and it doesn't allow the skirt material then to flow. There's like no room for the material to actually flow and create some movement, which is going to help the fish locate your bait. It's going to help the fish determine if your bait might be living or not. The point here is if you have too much material, it's actually it acts negatively. You don't get the movement to the skirt. It doesn't look good. It just tends to really be one mass in the water, and it's not exactly what you want. So the majority of skirts, if they're not tied thinner, now not necessarily this sparse, but generally a say 40 to 50 count versus like a 60 or higher count, I take scissors and I trim the bottom part. So you've got the part that comes under the band, this part right here, and I trim off most of that right up by the band. What that does is it allows the outside pieces of skirt material to be able to swim better and undulate better in the water. Definitely a big factor in terms of making your baits move better. If you like throwing vibrating jigs or swim jigs, I highly recommend removing a large part of the material because that will really help the bait hunt. With vibrating jigs, the thicker the skirt, the less it's going to hunt because that skirt's creating drag. It's not allowing it to dart left and right. Same sort of thing goes with your swim jigs. These are really very often overlooked. Most people take a jig and go right to the water, just start fishing it as is. And in my opinion, that's a big mistake. Now, the last thing I'll point out, and maybe some of you are watching this and say, well, skirt color doesn't really matter. That's fine. That's personal opinion. I disagree with that in some instances. Some instances, I don't think it makes a big difference. What I do think makes a big difference, though, is adding a little bit of different texture into your skirts. So skirts are generally all going to be made out of a silicone or round rubber. I like to add other materials in, like this, that can create different flash, different movement, and just an overall different look for the bait, and something that the majority of other people out there are not using. So whether it's like a tinsel or a flashabou or some sort of different thread material, it really is just something that can add different movements. I mean, this is peacock feathers right here, long pieces of strand. What I do is I usually just go into a fly tying shop and walk around and spend some time in there looking at the different materials. But the thing is, you can create a much different appearance to your baits, to your jigs, to your skirts by using some different materials that go into it. So, even if you don't tie your own jigs, you can still add material like that pretty simply onto pre-made jigs or pre-made skirts. But I do definitely think that you're probably making a mistake if you're just buying a bait at the store and putting it right to use, because like I said, unless it's a custom jig, generally speaking, the skirts they're made as one size fits all, and that's actually not how they should be made, or that's not how they should be paired up to those specific baits. I'm not blaming the manufacturers for this. I recognize how much more expensive it is and how many anglers like to fine-tune their baits themselves. But there's a lot of anglers out there that are not aware of this. So hopefully this video helps you be able to kind of trim up your skirt, get it to perform much better for you, which in turn is going to lead to you getting a lot more bites, which then means hopefully you're catching a bunch more fish. So hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Stay tuned, new video coming out tomorrow.